Please subscribe to my channel and like my video. Thank you for your support. Flight 666, A Journey of Terror and Secrets. Flight 666 was a passenger plane traveling from Madrid, Spain, to New York City, USA. On board were passengers from various nations and cultures. Some were on business trips, others were going on vacation, and some were visiting family. However, this was not going to be an ordinary flight. As the plane ascended into the sky, it was engulfed by the darkness of night. Most passengers had started to sleep, but a group of young passengers decided to explore and have fun on the plane. Spanish Pedro, American Sarah, French Antoine, and Italian Sofia were enjoying themselves in the aisles. However, turbulence caused some luggage to fall and crash in the middle of the plane, creating a loud noise. The noise startled all passengers, and a sense of panic spread through the cabin. As tension grew, the plane's electricity suddenly went out. With the lights off, passengers found it difficult to see each other in the dark cabin. Pedro took out his flashlight and began to illuminate the other passengers. When he looked out the plane's window, he was horrified by what he saw. Bright green lights were dancing in the sky outside. As everyone curiously watched, the plane suddenly shook as if struck by lightning. The electricity went out again. Amid Sofia's screams, the plane momentarily became uncontrollable. Antoine tried to calm the panicked passengers, while Sarah found an old piece of paper inside a wallet that had fallen to the floor. Noticing the paper was written in Old Spanish, Pedro tried to translate it. However, the text used a strange language and was difficult to understand. Shortly after, the pilot ran into the cabin to explain the emergency situation. He announced that there was an engine failure and that an emergency landing was necessary. Fear and worry were evident on the passengers' faces. The plane began to descend rapidly. Below them was nothing but a dark forest. As the pilot struggled to find the runway, the plane's wing hit a giant tree in the forest. A loud crash was followed by a deadly silence. As the plane wreckage burned, passengers tried to rescue each other. However, some were already severely injured. Antoine's legs were crushed, Sofia had a head injury, but Sarah managed to stay unharmed. Pedro tried to get a signal on his phone to report the emergency, but there was no signal. After a while, a strange sound began to echo from the depths of the forest. Passengers, bewildered by the sound, looked at each other with fear. Sarah, trying to stay calm, attempted to reassure the other passengers. However, the strange sound grew closer with each passing minute. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows of the dark forest. This figure resembled a giant dog, furry and fierce. The passengers' screams echoed through the forest. Pedro helplessly took a steel rod he found in the back cabin to defend against the creature.
The creature, with its sharp teeth, wild expression, and bright green eyes, looked at the passengers. Unexpectedly, it began to speak. "My name is Argo. I am the lord of this forest. I am displeased to see you here," it said. The passengers, stunned, stared at the creature as Argo's eyes fell upon Sarah.
Argo approached Sarah and extended his hands. As Sarah, caught between fear and curiosity, touched the creature, her eyes filled with visions and sounds from a distant memory. A past secret was unfolding. Other passengers, baffled by Argo's mysterious powers, did not know what to do. Sarah recalled an experience from her past, resembling an airplane crash years ago. Then, she felt that Argo had given her a mission. There was a secret among the passengers, and it needed to be revealed. Argo turned to the other passengers and offered them a choice. You can either learn the truth and accept your fate, or continue to hide the truth, it said. The passengers were silent. Finally, Antoine revealed the secret. A passenger on the plane was transporting a dangerous biological weapon, which had caused the plane to crash. A debate ensued among the passengers. Some blamed Antoine, while others tried to grasp the magnitude of the situation. Argo silently observed them. Eventually, the passengers had to make a decision. On one side was Antoine, struggling with his own internal battle for survival, and on the other was Sarah, who had decided to reveal the truth. As the tension in the plane reached its peak, the future of the passengers was shrouded in uncertainty. A single choice would change their fate forever. This story, filled with fear, tension, and secrets, awaited the inevitable end of Flight 666. The tension in the plane had reached its peak. The passengers had to come to an agreement. Antoine's reluctant confession shocked Sarah and the other passengers. Everyone wanted to know the truth behind the terrifying events on the plane. As Sarah listened to Antoine's story, she also thought about her own past. The last moments before the plane crash played like scenes from a breathtaking movie in her memories. To fulfill Argo's mission, she needed to face her own fears. The other passengers debated among themselves, trying to decide. Some wanted the secret revealed, while others feared the consequences. Argo silently watched, his dark eyes observing everyone. However, the real danger was not yet inside the plane. Suddenly, a strange entity emerged from the mist that filled the plane's cabin. This entity was a half-human, half-creature silhouette. With red eyes and long claws, it resembled a ghost. As the passengers screamed and retreated, the entity began to roam the cabin. When Sarah looked into the entity's eyes, she suddenly remembered all her past memories. A secret from her childhood was revealed, uncovering a terrifying darkness in her family. Antoine, Pedro, Sophia, and the other passengers also began to reveal their secrets one by one. The plane had turned into a confessional room. The strange entity fell silent after hearing the confessions and approached Sarah. As Sarah locked eyes with the entity, she once again delved into memories of the past, learning about the power and responsibility of secrets. The passengers watched the strange entity in astonishment. After a while, the strange entity vanished into the dark cabin and was never seen or heard from again. The plane fell silent. The passengers looked at each other, feeling the weight of the secrets they had revealed. Argo smiled silently one last time, and the mist inside the plane dispersed. As the plane continued its journey to America, the passengers had formed a bond. Each of them had learned lessons from the fear-filled experience, shared their secrets, and supported each other. Flight 666 had been an extraordinary journey filled with adventure, leaving a profound impact on the passengers' lives. This story, filled with terrifying and extraordinary events, was unforgettable. Delayed departure, a dark encounter. Robert and his wife Julia decided to fly to their favorite island destination for a week-long vacation. They purchased their plane tickets and arrived at the airport, only to receive some bad news. Their flight was delayed due to technical issues, and their journey would have to be postponed until the next day. Julia, worried, turned to Robert and asked, "What do we do now? Should we go back to the hotel or wait at the airport?" Robert calmly replied, "Let's wait at the airport. At least we won't have to go back to our room." Julia, still anxious, agreed to Robert's suggestion, and they decided to wait at the airport. Their flight was scheduled for midnight, so the airport was quite empty. Robert and Julia found some seats and began to wait. As time passed, the quiet and emptiness of the airport started to unsettle them. After a while, they heard a sound. It sounded like laughter coming from afar. Julia, scared, asked, "What was that?" Robert reassured her, "It's probably just one of the airport staff, don't worry." But Julia was still uneasy. The sound echoed again, this time closer. Robert and Julia looked around but saw no one. The sound repeated, clearer this time, resembling laughter. As Robert and Julia exchanged worried glances, a thick fog suddenly enveloped them. Robert shouted, "What's happening? What's this?" Julia, her voice trembling, said, "Maybe we're dreaming. Maybe we're falling asleep." But the fog thickened, making it impossible for them to see their surroundings. A voice echoed through the fog, "Welcome. We are delighted to have you with us." Robert and Julia clung to each other in fear. "Who's there? Please help us," they shouted. The fog slowly began to clear, revealing a strange creature in front of them. This being was half human, half monster, with glowing red eyes and a sinister grin. "We brought you here," the creature said. Robert and Julia's hearts pounded in their chests. The creature continued, "We will take you to a place you can never leave. This is an eternal darkness where nothing can be seen." Robert and Julia stared at the creature in terror. Suddenly, the creature enveloped them and transported them to another dimension. Robert and Julia found themselves in an unknown world at the mercy of this strange being. They wandered in fear, but there was nowhere to escape. The creature told them they would remain together in this place forever. As Robert and Julia screamed helplessly in the eternal darkness, their flight never took off and vanished without a trace. This dreadful creature held Robert and Julia captive in this alien world, forcing them to live by its own rules. With each passing day, they became more lost in fear and despair. The creature treated them like toys, manipulating their minds. Robert and Julia were powerless against the creature's strength. Every day, they clung to each other in fear and hopelessness, gradually forgetting their reality. The boundaries between night and day blurred, and time and space became meaningless. One day, the creature turned to Robert and said, "You must serve me now. You will act as I command and obey my orders." Robert and Julia had no choice but to comply with the creature's demands. They began to act like slaves to the creature. However, one day, an unexpected event occurred. Robert found a clue and discovered a way to escape the creature's control. Desperately, he turned to Julia and said, "We can escape, but we must work together." Julia nodded with hope, and together they began to evade the creature. As the creature realized their attempt to escape and pursued them, Robert and Julia made one last effort to follow the clue they had found. Running through the darkness, they desperately moved towards freedom. Finally, they reached a door where light shone through and passed through it together. On the other side, they found themselves back in the real world. With tears in their eyes and hearts full of relief, they had strengthened their bond. Robert and Julia decided to put the nightmare behind them and rebuild their lives together. From that day on, Robert and Julia believed that their love and solidarity could overcome any obstacle. They would never be separated, facing every challenge together. With each step forward, they grew stronger and more united, turning the terrifying experience into a testament to their enduring love. Robert and Julia strengthened their bond even further after their terrifying experience. The struggle they endured together gave them the power to overcome any other obstacles in life with ease. The challenging days they spent together made their relationship even more valuable and meaningful. Instead of fear and despair, love and solidarity became their greatest strengths. They would face every difficulty together, always supporting each other. With the lessons learned from this unique experience, Robert and Julia decided to move forward stronger in the real world. Leaving the fear-filled story behind, they embarked on a new beginning. Robert and Julia now cherished every moment of their lives together, always remembering the value of their love. They would overcome the toughest situations together, always supporting each other with their love. They had an unwavering belief that they would always be stronger and together. And so, the fear-filled story of Robert and Julia brought them closer together and made them stronger as they moved forward. Their love and solidarity gave them strength and happiness every moment of their lives. In the end, this terrifying story ensured that despite all the challenges they faced, they reached a love-filled conclusion. Turbulent Flight, a tale of fear and resilience. Michael and Angelica were excitedly making their way to the airport, eager to catch their flight. They had been planning this trip for a long time, and the much-anticipated day had finally arrived. After swiftly completing their check-in procedures, they roamed the airport while waiting for their departure. As the time for their flight approached, Michael and Angelica's excitement grew. Once they boarded the plane and took their seats, a sense of unease crept over them. Angelica's face showed signs of worry. As the plane took off and ascended into the sky, the weather suddenly turned ominous. Dark clouds enveloped the plane, and lightning strikes began to shake it. Michael and Angelica clung to their seats and each other. Suddenly, the cabin lights went out, and panic spread throughout the plane. The pilot made an announcement, trying to assure everyone that the situation was under control, but fear and anxiety continued to escalate. Suddenly, the plane's engines failed, and it began to plummet uncontrollably. Michael and Angelica held each other tightly, eyes closed. Along with their fear, a sense of hopelessness filled their hearts. The screams and prayers of other passengers echoed around them. As the plane rapidly descended, a loud explosion was heard, and everything plunged into darkness. After some time, Michael opened his eyes to find only the burning wreckage of the plane around him. Injured and panicked, he stood up and began to search for Angelica, but she was not by his side. As he slowly moved through the wreckage, he suddenly heard Angelica's weak voice calling, "Michael, help me." Following the sound, he found her trapped and injured under the debris. Her wounds were severe, and she was struggling to breathe. Michael was at a loss for how to free Angelica from the wreckage when he suddenly heard a voice say, "Come here. I'll help you." A mysterious figure appeared next to Angelica, and hope flickered in Michael's heart. The mysterious figure guided Michael on what to do, and together they managed to free Angelica from the debris. They moved her to safety and headed outside the wreckage to call for help. Hearing the sounds of the rescue teams, they felt a wave of relief. Michael and Angelica had survived the terrifying ordeal of the plane crash. They were among the lucky few who had escaped. As Angelica's wounds were treated, Michael stayed by her side, realizing anew the value of being together. The horrific event brought them closer, and they realized just how strong they were together. The trauma and fear from the plane crash continued to affect Michael and Angelica's lives, but they decided to face these nightmares together and vowed to support each other. When they boarded their next flight, their hearts still carried some trepidation, but the comforting presence of each other made them feel stronger. Holding each other tightly throughout the flight, they drew strength from the shared experience, ready to embrace life with renewed vigor. As their plane ascended into the sky once more, Michael and Angelica closed their eyes and continued their journey. They didn't know what the future held, but they knew they would face it together. The harrowing moments they had endured had forged an unbreakable bond between them. As their plane headed towards its destination, a beacon of hope shone on the horizon. Michael and Angelica, having overcome their nightmare together, sailed into the future with peace and happiness. They were now ready to face their fears and cherish every moment life offered them. With the strength they gained from surviving the terrifying plane crash, Michael and Angelica decided to spend the rest of their lives together. The experience had deepened their bond and reinforced their desire to share every moment of their lives. Over the years, Michael and Angelica bought a beautiful home and started a happy life together. Angelica's wounds healed, leaving only memories behind. They decided to live their lives more consciously and lovingly, drawing strength from their experience. They continued to travel together, exploring different countries and embarking on new adventures. Always there for each other, supporting and trusting one another, Michael and Angelica knew they could overcome any challenge together. One day, they went to the seaside to watch the sunset. Holding hands, they walked towards the horizon, filled with hope for the future. The terrifying moments they had faced together had made their relationship even more valuable and meaningful. Michael and Angelica believed wholeheartedly that with their love, they could overcome any obstacle and face life's challenges together. The nightmare they had endured had made them a stronger and more united couple. Thus, Michael and Angelica welcomed a future filled with life, love, and peace. The terrifying experience had brought them closer and made them a stronger couple. In the end, they saluted a new day with the hope of living a beautiful life with their loved ones. The final flight, a tale of terror in the skies. Michael and Jessica had been looking forward to their vacation for months. It was a much-needed break from their hectic lives, and they were excited to escape to a tropical paradise. As they arrived at the airport, their anticipation grew. The bustling terminal was filled with travelers, each on their own journey. After a smooth check-in and a brief wait, they boarded Flight 932, which would take them from New York to Bali. The plane was a massive Boeing 777, and it was packed with passengers. Michael and Jessica found their seats and settled in, ready for the long flight ahead. As the plane taxied down the runway and lifted into the sky, everything seemed normal. The seat belt signs were turned off, and the passengers began to relax. Flight attendants moved through the aisles, serving drinks and snacks. Michael and Jessica chatted about their plans for the vacation, laughing and enjoying each other's company. But as the plane reached cruising altitude, things started to change. A strange tension filled the cabin, and the atmosphere grew heavy. Jessica noticed that the flight attendants were whispering to each other, their faces pale and worried. She tried to brush it off, but an uneasy feeling settled in her stomach. An hour into the flight, the plane hit turbulence. It wasn't unusual, but this turbulence felt different. It was rougher, more violent. The passengers were jolted in their seats, and the overhead bins rattled loudly. The captain's voice came over the intercom, trying to reassure everyone that it was just a patch of rough air and that they should remain seated with their seat belts fastened. Despite the captain's reassurances, the turbulence didn't subside. It grew worse, shaking the plane with increasing intensity. The lights flickered, and a few passengers screamed as the plane dipped and swayed. Michael gripped Jessica's hand tightly, his knuckles white with fear. Suddenly, the lights went out completely, plunging the cabin into darkness. Panic erupted among the passengers, their terrified voices mingling into a cacophony of fear. The emergency lights flickered on, casting an eerie red glow over the cabin. The flight attendants struggled to maintain order, but their own fear was evident. As the turbulence continued, a loud metallic groan echoed through the plane. It sounded like the aircraft was being torn apart. Jessica glanced out the window and gasped. Through the thick clouds, she saw a strange, dark shape moving alongside the plane. It was massive and serpentine, coiling and uncoiling with an otherworldly grace. "Michael, look," she whispered, her voice trembling. Michael turned to look, his eyes widening in horror. The shape seemed to be a shadow, but it moved with purpose, as if it were alive. Suddenly, the plane lurched violently, and the shadow vanished. The turbulence ceased abruptly, leaving the cabin in an unsettling silence. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom again, but this time it was strained and filled with static. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing an unexpected issue. Please remain calm and stay seated." As the minutes ticked by, the cabin grew colder. The passengers shivered, their breaths visible in the freezing air. Jessica rubbed her arms, trying to ward off the chill. "Something's not right," she said to Michael. "This isn't just turbulence." Michael nodded, his eyes scanning the cabin. "I know. We need to stay calm and see what happens." A few rows ahead, a passenger stood up, his face twisted in panic. "We're going to die. We're all going to die," he screamed. The flight attendants rushed to subdue him, but his words sent a wave of terror through the cabin. Jessica felt a sudden, sharp pain in her chest, as if icy fingers were squeezing her heart. She gasped, clutching at her chest. "Michael, I don't feel so good," she whispered. Before Michael could respond, the plane was engulfed in darkness again. The emergency lights flickered and died, leaving the passengers in complete blackness. The only sound was the panicked breathing of the terrified passengers. In the pitch black, a chilling voice echoed through the cabin. It was low and guttural, filled with malice. "You cannot escape," it said. "You are all mine." Jessica's grip on Michael's hand tightened. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Michael nodded, his heart pounding. "We need to stay together," he said. "No matter what happens, we stick together." The plane shook violently, and a loud crash reverberated through the cabin. It sounded like something had struck the plane. The emergency lights flickered back on, revealing a scene of chaos. Passengers were out of their seats, screaming and crying. Luggage had fallen from the overhead bins, and debris littered the aisles. The shadowy figure appeared again, this time inside the cabin. It moved with an unnatural fluidity, slipping between the passengers, its presence sending waves of cold dread through everyone it passed. The figure's eyes glowed a menacing red, and it seemed to feed on the passengers' fear. Michael and Jessica watched in horror as the shadow approached them. It stopped in front of their row, its glowing eyes fixed on them. "You cannot escape," it repeated, its voice a sinister whisper. Jessica felt a cold hand brush against her cheek, and she recoiled in terror. Michael stood up, putting himself between her and the shadow. "Leave us alone," he shouted, his voice trembling. The shadow laughed, a sound that chilled them to the bone. "Your fate is sealed," it said. "None of you will leave this plane alive." Suddenly, the plane's engines roared back to life, and the aircraft jolted violently. The lights flickered, and the shadow vanished. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom once more, but this time it was filled with urgency. "Brace for impact. We're going down." Michael and Jessica clung to each other, their hearts racing. The plane descended rapidly, the ground rushing up to meet them. Passengers screamed and cried, their voices mingling with the roar of the engines. The impact was sudden and brutal. The plane crashed into the ground with a deafening explosion, tearing apart on impact. Flames erupted from the wreckage, and the acrid smell of burning fuel filled the air. As the smoke cleared, the scene was one of devastation. The plane was nothing more than twisted metal and scattered debris. There were no survivors. The shadowy figure lingered among the wreckage, its malevolent eyes surveying the destruction. In the end, Flight 932E's journey ended in tragedy. The passengers, each with their own hopes and dreams, were lost to the darkness. Their final moments were filled with terror and despair, a haunting reminder of the fragility of life. The shadowy figure disappeared into the night, leaving behind a scene of horror that would be remembered by those who found the wreckage. The cause of the crash remained a mystery, but those who knew the truth would forever be haunted by the malevolent presence that had doomed Flight 932. Thank you for listening.